everyone. Welcome to another edition of Thought Leaders Live, where we talk with thought leaders in business, life, and all points in between. Today, very excited and fortunate to have with us Ema Roloff, the co-founder and chief growth officer at Roloff Consulting, a digital transformation expert. And Emma is also the host of Leading Change. So, Emma, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, so we had your husband James on your opening act, and so we're here, happy to have you, the headliner, come and join us today. Um, Emma,
Poor
why
guy.
don't you tell I better keep going so you don't have to comment on that. Emma, why why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and about Roloff Consulting?
Yeah. Well, I think you gave a nice kind of an entry point for me, but my background is started in education. So I went to school to be a teacher, made a hard pivot into the corporate world after graduation with a corporate training position that I was offered. For those of us that are in Wisconsin at Culver's, I had worked there all through high school and college and had some internships there that turned into a full-time position. And that was my moment where I realized I actually really enjoy business and working in with adults. I mean, nothing against those kids. I love kids. I have
Oh yeah.
I have my two.
Yeah.
But I realized that I really enjoy adult education and helping people think through things differently and getting difficult concepts to click. And after I came to that realization, James, he may be the opening act, but he's also kind of the mastermind, I think, sometimes, and is like working his master plan behind the scenes. And he convinced me about 10 years ago to go into sales, and with the mindset that the best salespeople are teachers.
Mm,
And
wow.
now, fast forward to where we're at today, 10 years later, our business, Roloff Consulting, is focused on helping people implement our framework, which is the favorite teacher framework. So it kind of goes full circle moment back to my background as an educator and this concept that in order to sell a product, get in front of people, the best way to do that is an educational based approach. And so now we spend our time focused on helping business leaders, executives, founders really tap into this idea of how to use education as a way to get in front of people, build trust, build authority, generate revenue, and also how some of that bleeds into how you manage internally and what it means to be a leader within your organization and how you use that thought process and a lot of these ideas to improve your internal leadership as well.
Oh yeah, and so James, I always kid James, but he is such a smart guy, and so I think I met him a few years ago when he was doing website design, but his understanding, I think, of just the whole marketing process and digital is really amazing, and I think you guys make a fantastic team. So it was really exciting to see you both come out on and create your own business together. And tell us a little bit. I'd like to hear a little more about your background, especially your rise on social media, because you've created such an incredible presence there, and I think you're definitely an influencer in many eyes, and I think what you've done is very inspiring, and it gives you a lot of gravitas when it comes to speaking to executives in terms of what that influence can do for a company. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey as an influencer?
Yeah. So I, contrary to what a lot of people would think now, 5 years into this journey, really was not a huge social media person. When I graduated college, I got rid of my Facebook. I had an Instagram. I think there was max 100 people that were following it. And it was used strictly as a way to show my family members that lived out of state the fancy clothes that they had bought our baby. Like that was the extent of what my social media looked like at that point. I started sales, and everyone had talked about how cold calling was dead and social selling was the way to go. And at the time when I first started back in like 2014, 2015, I created my LinkedIn. I did all of the connections with like, I am growing my professional network. And then at that point, all you could really do on LinkedIn was like post articles and go into groups and comment on people's stuff. And I, like many people, didn't really see benefit from that. The one thing that came out of it is it got me starting to create blog posts and write content from that perspective. And that did prove to kind of be a part of that arc. But I had kind of like brushed LinkedIn off as an opportunity to generate business and kind of went back hard into traditional mechanisms of selling. And I did a lot of lunch and learns and still in this like educational component, a lot of webinars and kind of still stuff that like hit on the idea of digital, but it wasn't social selling in my mind. Um, I was successful with that approach. I had reached a point where I was selling a lot of software and services and doing well. And then, like everybody's story, I feel like at some point COVID comes up where everything halted and froze where it was at, except for my quota. And
Mhm.
I still had a very large software quota in front of me. And all of the tools that I had been using to try and get in front of buyers, to try and educate people, take this whole approach, stopped working. Even some of the digital stuff that I had done. No one was like sitting around reading blog posts at nauseum at that point. Nobody was interested in joining another webinar because, especially in that height of COVID, everyone and their mom was trying to do a webinar to tell you about their COVID response or get in front of you in that way. And that was no longer an effective tool. So, everything that I had done in the past, including cold calling, when I would call people during COVID, no one was forwarding their phones to their cell phones. So, you'd hit voicemail boxes or full voicemail boxes when you tried to do any sort of calling. And so that like all of those tools just disappeared overnight. And I like this conversation similar to the one I could go on about like our my intervention that brought me into sales on Thanksgiving, because James didn't do that alone. It was his dad and his uncle and this like whole family affair. That lives in my brain. And this next story lives in my brain like forever. We
Okay.
were sitting in our our kitchen at our kitchen counter, and we've got like an open concept to our house, and we have two little girls who then were much littler, and we had a 1-year-old and a 4-year-old, and they were watching Frozen 2 on repeat during COVID era. So that's playing in the background of the conversation. And I looked at James and I was like, I don't know what I'm gonna do. Like I'm getting full voicemail boxes. Nobody's opening emails anymore. I am at a loss for how I'm gonna hit this $3 million number. Like, what do I do? And he said to me, well, why don't you try video? And my exact response was, does anybody want to watch video about digital transformation? And he said, what's the worst that happens? No one watches it and you stop. And so after that, I decided, like, okay, I'm going to do it. And I always joke that it was like a very slow progression. And it started with using my 1-year-old baby as a prop because we were still at home. The kids didn't have daycare. And James and I would trade off what we called in the wild. So one of us would be out with the kids, one would be behind closed doors because we were both in sales positions, like customer facing. There were plenty of times that we couldn't be with the kids having calls with. And so James was behind closed doors. I was out in the wild, and I was like, if I'm going to do it, I just need to do it. And I picked up the baby so that she didn't crawl away and go hurt herself because there were a couple of those at the beginning of COVID. And I made my first video, and it was literally like, hey, we're all in this. Like, point in case, I've got this baby here so she doesn't crawl away, but we're all in this. And here's some things that you can do to like learn a little bit more about how to digitize your process, because that was a part of what we did at the time. And I posted the video, and at that point, again, had been posting articles and whatever else. And it was the first time that I had a post that went over 1,000 impressions. And I was like, oh, okay. So like this kind of worked. But I obviously don't want my baby in every one of my videos, and that's not a sustainable like strategy. So what do we do moving forward? So then I reached out to a bunch of my coworkers and said, "Hey, I want to start a video series and I want to highlight the work that we're doing. I want to do interviews. Will somebody volunteer to be my first victim?" And I had one of our consultants say like, "Okay, let's give it a try." And so we sat down and we did an interview. And the first couple of interviews I did were all internal people at my company. And again, I started to see this traction coming from these videos. And they're like going back. Thank God there was someone that was willing to do it with me, but they were so awkward and uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And thinking back to like all of the steps that had to come into place, there was no StreamYard to do this kind of live stream at that point. There was no like CapCut for editing. It was the most like broken process where I was screen recording conversations because at that point, most of the like Zoom, GoToMeeting, all of those, like they didn't record conversations even at that point. Like this was
Yeah.
pre that capability coming out. So I was screen recording stuff. I mean, it was a mountain to climb. But
Yeah.
on the other side, I saw views. And so I just said, okay, I'm getting serious about this. And I started digging into podcast episodes and listening to other people that were kind of going through the same trajectory of like, this is an opportunity. There is a
Yeah.
massive opportunity to be an early adopter right now. And after I graduated from using the baby as a prop and other people within my company in that interview series, then it transitioned into reaching out to external people and shooting the shot, which like honestly, it was so nice as a salesperson to be able to reach out to someone and say, "Hey, do you want to do an interview?" and have them say, "Sounds great," instead of just not
Yeah.
responding
Right.
or anything that you get normally in sales. And then it grew from there. And as I got more comfortable interviewing other people, I started having other people ask me to be a guest on their podcast, which was kind of like the next step. So I went from asking the questions to being in the seat of like having the authority to share my experience and what I had learned. And then after I got positive feedback from that, I got brave enough to pick up my phone and start making my own content that was my ideas and my thought processes on the industry. Um, and then eventually it segued into like goofier things like TikToks and that kind of stuff where I can show other parts of my personality and make these connections and like have the content have more fun and be a little bit more authentic to who I am. And so like that's those slow steps of getting comfortable probably took me about 2 years. And like towards the end of that 2-year period is where I started to see things like really click and be like, okay, this is going to be a part of my professional career moving forward. Not that I didn't have signs that like things were working in between that time frame, but I finally felt comfortable with what my voice was on social media and like how I wanted to move forward with it after kind of getting to that point where I could be comfortable on camera on my own.
Sure. Sure. And I think you're such a natural too and very authentic and you have a lot to say. I mean, one of the things of thought leadership is you have to have a lot of ideas and then be prolific in terms of the content you're producing and you're doing both of those, Emma. So it's great to see it. We've got a stalker here. Hey, James.
In a
Uh,
different room in the house.
in a different room in the house. Okay. Thanks for that comment, James. Much appreciated. Let's jump right into though. Let's talk a little bit about digital leadership. What does that really mean? How can executives use their platforms to guide teams, shape culture, and build lasting influence? What are you and James trying to do with digital leadership?
So I kind of opened this idea up during the introduction of kind of like what we do and what we help companies with. But going through this process on my own and now helping people that are a part of our Catalyst community and our clients on the consulting side move through this process, there's a couple of things that happen when you start creating content that allow you to become a better leader. So let's take myself as that salesperson, right? You mentioned the idea that it takes a lot to become the type of person that is able to create content and lead conversations. Well, part of that comes from staying educated on your own, right? To be able to create content, you have to know what's going on in current events. You have to stay up to date, especially like in my scenario, like up to date with technology. You have to understand what's coming. You have to have the lived experience to be able to contrast those two ideas. And so, one thing that came from it is I got a lot more interested in my industry as a whole because I was digging into these concepts that maybe I wouldn't have had I just stayed in my little bucket of selling my specific software solution, right? I got really fanatical about the people side of digital transformation because as I was having all of these conversations and getting to talk to all of these really interesting people in the technology space, I started to like recognize some patterns and come back to like, well, wait, hold on. Before we get too excited with the hype, like, what about these people that are back here? And I started to discover this different, like, avenue of my passion for the work that I did through the conversations that I was having. So it helps you stay informed. It helps you, like, from that standpoint, like, become, again, more of an expert in your space. Then there's this other piece that, like, if you are constantly talking about your industry and the pain points that people are facing or how you're tackling challenges, it's an at bat for pitching your company and your service. It's a way for you to get more articulate with the way that you talk about how you solve problems. And so I got better at my job as a salesperson from that perspective. And I was able to then elevate my authority within my sales cycles because people knew that I knew what I was talking about before I came in. So
Hmm.
not only was I
Right.
improving my own personal experience, but I was showcasing my experience and my understanding out to the world in a way that I hadn't been able to do in the past. And I don't want to make this about being like young or a female, but like specifically in the technology space, in the insurance industry, in the manufacturing industry, into the places that I was selling, I was on average 20 to 25 years younger than most of the people in the room, and sometimes one of the only, if not the only, women in the room. And not that anyone was like rude or, like terrible to me because of that, but I noticed a very substantial shift in the authority that I had in the room after I was going through the content creation process in comparison to what I saw before. When I would go in before, even if I was the one who had made the meetings, if I was the one who was giving the presentation, you would see body language shift towards my male boss, who could have been my dad. After that, and after having a reputation that preceded me that had this authority and this intrinsic trust, that body language didn't shift. People came to me as the expert. People looked at me as the expert. And it allowed me to go into those conversations with more confidence and be able to like drive the outcomes that we were looking for, just all from this place of having created this content and validated my ideas and seeing these trends in a different way than I had before.
Yeah, I think you kind of become this legend, by just showing up on social media. I mean, I'm not nowhere near the following you have, but I'm just on there enough where people will be like, "Oh yeah, I saw you on social media, I saw you on LinkedIn." And you just get known by people even if you're not on there that much. I want to circle back to something that you just said about when you were learning and getting out and researching the industry, you learned a lot of things. And I think when
Mhm.
you're creating content, Stephen King says about writing, these are the lessons you teach yourself. And I think when you're creating content, you teach yourself a lot of things. Speak to me, if you would, a little bit about how this content process can help an executive create that clear and compelling vision. And you say it's effective for leadership. Does creating content help you really hone that vision and create it in the first place?
Yes. Yes to both.
Yeah.
um, so one of the things that I think is most important about being a strong leader is the idea of being a continuous learner and somebody who is genuinely interested in the industry that you're in solving the problem that your company is designed to solve. And far, and I will also get to one of the cautions on like the visioning side with content creation and constantly be absorbing information. But when you spend time continuously learning about what other people in your industry are doing, having conversations with them about the way that they're approaching things, you start to again recognize the patterns that you're seeing of what are successful companies doing, what's resonating with people. And maybe it's an idea of like you make a video as a leader on something to kind of soft launch it and see what the comments say or see what the response has been to something that you're putting out into the market, to see if it's a good move or not. There's probably a lot of CEOs who could deal with like making a video and getting the comments of what a return to work policy will do. Like,
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
that that's like obviously like the whole vision side of things, but like putting information out there is a really great sounding board for you to be able to get feedback on your ideas maybe before you make the final decision on a direction that you want to take. So as a leader, say you're looking at like experimenting with AI in a specific place. First, you should hopefully start with a problem, but like maybe you go out and you ask other people what they're doing and you get a ton of comments, or you get a couple of comments and one of them makes you think about it a little differently. That's going to help you clarify your message back to your team. That's going to help you drive decisions on how you interact with technology or certain decisions that are coming forward that are going to impact that vision of where you want to take the company. And it gives you, depending on the platform that you're creating content on LinkedIn, you're probably going to hear a lot of like, woohoo, great, going. But like, again, if you're brave enough to create content on other platforms, you'll get really specific viewpoints from people that are going to give you different experiences or insights into people's different experiences and their ideas on the way that things should be shaped, good, bad, or indifferent, that help you make decisions or help you think about how you're going to communicate that vision out to people. So I think that there's this really interesting, like, you have a crowd at your disposal to test ideas with. And I've done that a number of times for things for our business, for things with like how I'm going to present ideas during presentations. I'll pick up my phone and I'll ask a really open-ended question and put it out to the internet and see what comments come back. Sometimes you don't get a lot of feedback, but then there's other times where I've gotten enough feedback to literally pull together an entire framework on how executives should be shaping their vision. And so like that's one really cool way to use it to form your vision, right? But then going back to this idea of whether it's your sales messaging out on how your company can help people, or getting really good at talking about your vision and where you want to take your company, the more you say it, the more you talk about it, the more you're challenged against it, the better you get at clearly articulating it. And so I think from like a vision standpoint, as a leader, if you are the type of person who is willing to take good, bad, and different and everything in between feedback, you can learn a lot from content creation and get better at your messaging, get better at talking to people in your company that maybe have different experiences or backgrounds than you do, and really strengthening that like clarity and vision piece. And you don't have, again, you're not like putting trade secrets out. You're not giving like inside information that only the board should know about, but you can ask questions and you can think of ways to position stuff so that you're able to strengthen that vision and clarity pretty significantly while you're creating content. And I think there's a huge, 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 huge opportunity for leaders that are willing to do that. But there's a lot of people that are still a little nervous. And, we were talking about, I did this during COVID. Well, guess what? In the B2B space, there is opportunity right now for people to be early adopters of using social media as a tool. Because back when I started, it was still all B2C. Like nobody even thought of like LinkedIn influencers. Nobody had like, I mean, maybe not nobody, that's an exaggeration, but there were very few people that had like huge followings on LinkedIn that were like activating people to go towards certain like industry fads. We were still all looking at analysts at that point. Over the last 5 years, this has all shifted, and founders and executives have a really cool opportunity to take control of the conversation and shake things up if they're willing to do it.
I think you're right on, Emma. I mean, as we've done a lot more research and work into thought leadership, and we've had some people on this show, CEOs, and there is so much upside that is coming out of it. And these CEOs are like, you can just tell, like we had Aaron Carroll on here. He's like an evangelist for doing this. It has helped him and his business in so many ways. And what I guess so, we're marketers, we're in sales, we're all for this. This come naturally to us. It's what we do. But what's the drawback? I mean, like why do you think more CEOs aren't doing it? Or are we, like you said, this is like the COVID thing where it's going to become mandatory. Otherwise your competitor is going to do it. You better get out there too.
I think it's all fear based. And I think this goes to another key component of this idea of digital leadership. For the last 15 to 20 years, I mean, much more specifically prior to that, but for the last like 15, 20 years, social media has been around, right? It's been something that people have been using in various forms, whether that's, way back in the day with like MySpace and the very early days of Facebook. No one was looking at that as like a business opportunity, right? To now where we're at, the business world has thought of social media as something that is curated and perfect and has a marketing team of 25 people behind it. And we've all become desensitized to it. But because of that mindset of everything having to be approved by 35 people before it goes out the door and all of these other things, there is a sense of fear associated with what if I put out the wrong messaging and I haven't thought through everything? And yeah, if you're going out and saying offensive things, maybe you need 25 people to review it. But realistically, what is happening and what we've seen happening since COVID is people are like desperately thirsty for authenticity. And they want to work with companies and people that are real. And that's only going to get more and more intense, like that desire for human connectivity as we see AI schlop make its way into everything. And so, this opportunity that executives have right now to show up, be a real person, and share their thoughts on things and really start a movement is a different approach than perfectly curated Instagram feeds with everything following the perfect guidelines of marketing and whatever else. And there's a lot of companies that are really nervous about what that freedom and authenticity looks like and if there is a backlash. And to your point, there's probably certain things in messaging that needs to go through the machine to make sure you're not accidentally overseeing some sort of bias that you have and putting something out there that shouldn't be. But if you're talking about your industry and your expertise and your like professional opinions, I'd be hard pressed to find a way that you're going to like go viral for offending people.
Right.
Like,
Right.
and in this B2B space, if you're talking about your industry, you should be going out and maybe sharing hot takes that not everybody agrees with, because that's going to be what makes you stand out. That's going to be what attracts the right people. And showing up as a real person and the people behind a company is going to bring the right prospects and customers towards you. Like, there are probably people that watch my content and get annoyed. There's probably people that are like, why is she out there doing trending TikTok sounds and making up like, like these analogies, whatever. There's probably there, I mean, not probably. There are people who are annoyed with me. But guess what? They wouldn't enjoy working with me, and we wouldn't have a good collaborative partnership. partnership moving forward. So good, watch my content, get annoyed with me, and go work with someone else. But the people who get my sense of humor or think it's fun to see a little bit of lightness put into different industries that are typically kind of like stale, great, come on down. Let's talk about it. Being professional doesn't have to be boring. I've got a
Yeah.
collar, I'm professional, but I also do things that are silly and make people laugh. And that's like, that's the kind of business that I want to build. So those are the kind of customers that I want to bring to us. And like showing that authenticity makes you not marketable to everybody, but it brings the right customers in the door.
Oh, absolutely. And I think what you're saying about being authentic really applies to leadership these days. Libby Rodney from the Harris Poll was on the show a couple episodes ago and talking about how the level of distrust for executives has never been higher.
Mhm.
And it's a real problem with AI because now you have to get out there and you have to combat the disinformation. So your authenticity now seems to matter more than ever. I don't know if you feel the same way about executives getting out there.
Yeah. I mean, at this point, so from the statistics that I've seen, 29% of people trust their leadership right now.
Wow.
And that's like a pretty significant drop. I think a couple of years ago it was at 34%, which is still nothing to write home about.
Right.
But like we have dipped even further.
Yeah.
And a big part of it is because we spend all of our time as companies trying to, again, like portray this professionalism and like something, I think something refreshing and special happened during COVID where everyone was at home, everyone was in it together, everybody was experiencing the same thing. And if your kid, like it, true story, if a kid busts in the background in a Spider-Man suit while you're on a call, people laughed about it.
Yeah.
But now we're kind of like reverting back to the way that things were prior to that. And not in every case, but this like thought process of authenticity isn't going to go away. We got that. We knew how nice it was. We saw what that looked like. And now we want that. And the pullback of these other things that don't have a strong why behind them, of putting people back into the office or making decisions to implement AI and in the name of efficiency and then laying people off, like all of these things where we're not just having real conversations about what's going on and everything is posturing, makes that trust erode even further.
That's a really good
And
point.
if you as a leader skip social media, if you can send your team a video of you explaining in plain language why decisions are being made and what it's going to mean for them, and have a true human connection, people are going to trust you a lot more than they will if it's, a press release statement that is attached to an email and sent out to the team. And I can't tell you how many people, like, I think the gold standard when you're creating content is when you go out, and I know that this has happened to you, Greg, and happens a lot on my end, where you go out and you meet someone and they say, like, I feel like I know you.
Yeah.
And that trust that you can build through creating authentic content. Now, it needs to be who you are, because if they
Right.
meet you and you're not who you were, then
Right.
you have a whole other issue and the trust is eroded really quickly. But like when somebody can see that and see content and feel like they know you and then meet you and feel that validation that you're the person that they have been watching or interacting with, that trust that you've been slowly building video by video, post by post, comment by comment, compounds, and like your business relationship is then based off of that trust. And as an executive, depending on the size of your company, you don't have the opportunity to meet everybody in the break room anymore. If you're remote, you don't have the opportunity to bump into them anywhere.
Right.
Your only interactions are virtual
Yep.
and probably scheduled to hell or high water if you're an executive, and you're
Yeah.
like time bound to 30-minute calls back to back all day. How you break out of that is showing up on social media, showing up on, in the email with a video or something that breaks it apart, or sending people little like DMs throughout the day. But if you've got thousands of employees, you can't do that kind of like one-on-one touch. So you have these other tools that are at your disposal that let you lead authentically through scale. And that is, I think, the piece here is that we now have tools that allow us to go back to what we used to do when there was 25 people in the company, but scale it. And it's the same way on the sales and marketing side. We have the opportunity now to take our best messaging and scale it and do it authentically. And so I think that that's like the most important piece, and it definitely can get rid of some. And I mean, again, you have to actually show up as who you are. Like,
Right. No, that's a great point about the scaling. And I know when companies get to like 100, people, it's really hard to keep in touch with employees. So you need to use every tool at your disposal. Emma, we're in overtime now. We're past the half hour mark. Thank you so much for joining me. And this was a great conversation. We could keep going on. If somebody wants to work with Roloff Consulting, how do they get a hold of you?
So you can come to my LinkedIn profile. As you can see, the tricky part is my name only has one M. So Ema Roloff. Or our company, super creatively named Roloff Consulting after us Roloffs running it. So that's our website, Roloff Consulting, same on LinkedIn. You can shoot us a direct message on LinkedIn, fill out a contact form on our website. We're pretty easy to find. And even if it's just little questions here or there too, shoot me a DM. I'm happy to help how I can.
Okay. Thanks again for joining us, and Emma, and thank you to everyone for tuning in to another Thought Leaders Live, and we'll see you on the next one.
Thanks, Greg.